Rachel Simmons was 34 years old, a traveling nurse on a 3-month contract in rural Arizona, and she had made exactly one mistake that night. She had trusted the GPS. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late October when her phone's navigation system rerouted her off Interstate 10, claiming there was a 40-minute delay due to construction ahead. And without questioning it, she followed the glowing blue line onto a narrow county road that cut through absolute darkness. The town she was heading toward, a small community called Eloy, was still 26 miles away. But this new route promised to shave 15 minutes off her drive. And after a brutal 12-hour shift at a Phoenix hospital where she had lost 2 patients, those 15 minutes felt like a gift she desperately needed. What Rachel didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that her phone had picked up a corrupted signal from a cell tower damaged in a storm 3 days earlier, and the route it had chosen would take her through an area so remote that local emergency services called it simply the dead zone. For the first 10 minutes, the drive was uneventful, just empty desert stretching out on either side of her headlights, the kind of vast, silent landscape that made you feel impossibly small and utterly alone against the ancient expanse of earth and sky and endless nothing. She kept her window cracked to let in the cool night air, listening to a true crime podcast playing softly through her speakers, appreciating the irony of it now more than she ever would have before that night changed everything. The road was unpaved in sections, kicking up dust that coated her windshield in a fine brown film, and she had to use her wipers twice to clear it, the scraping sound cutting through the quiet like a small violation of the sacred stillness surrounding her. At 12:03 a.m., she noticed her fuel gauge had dipped below a quarter tank, something she should have addressed back in Phoenix but had forgotten in her exhaustion, and a thin thread of anxiety began weaving through her chest like a warning she should have heeded. There were no gas stations out here, no buildings of any kind, just occasional rusted fence posts marking property lines that hadn't been relevant in decades. She told herself it was fine, that she had enough fuel to make it, that the GPS wouldn't have sent her this way if it wasn't safe. But even as she thought it, she knew she was lying to herself, because technology failed people all the time, and tonight it had failed her completely and without mercy. At 12:11 a.m., her headlights caught something ahead, a vehicle parked on the shoulder, a white van with no markings, its hazard lights blinking in a slow, rhythmic pulse that felt almost hypnotic in its unsettling regularity. Rachel's foot eased off the gas instinctively, her brain running through possibilities. A breakdown, a flat tire, someone who needed help out here in the middle of nowhere. She was a nurse, after all, trained to respond to emergencies, and for a moment she genuinely considered pulling over to offer assistance. But something stopped her cold. Something about the way the van was positioned, angled slightly toward the road as if waiting for someone to approach, and something about the fact that she couldn't see anyone near it. No figure by the hood, no one waving for assistance, no movement whatsoever in the eerie orange glow of those hazard lights. She pressed the gas and drove past without stopping, watching the van shrink in her rearview mirror until it disappeared into the darkness behind her like it had never existed. Her heart was beating faster now, a steady thrum she could feel in her throat, and she reached for her phone to check how much farther she had to go. But the screen showed no signal, not even a single bar, and the GPS had frozen on a map that no longer updated or responded to her frantic taps. She was alone, truly alone, in a way she hadn't been in years, and the weight of that realization settled over her like a physical thing pressing down on her chest. For the next 7 minutes, she drove in tense silence, eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror, searching for headlights that weren't there yet. The road curved gently right, then straightened, and the desert remained utterly still, as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. At 12:18 a.m., she saw them, 2 small points of light in her mirror, distant but unmistakable, growing slowly larger as they approached from behind with patient, deliberate intent. Her first thought was relief, maybe just another traveler rerouted by bad GPS. But her second thought was darker, more primal, whispering a single word in her mind: the van. She pressed the gas harder, pushing to 65, then 70, the engine straining against the rough road, and she watched those lights in the mirror, measuring the distance with growing dread and rising terror. They were gaining on her. Not quickly, not aggressively, but steadily, patiently, like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to go and all the time in the world to catch it. Rachel's hands tightened on the wheel until her knuckles turned white, and she forced herself to breathe, to think, to remember everything she had ever learned about survival. She remembered a self-defense instructor from nursing school saying, "Your car is your best weapon. Never get out unless you have absolutely no other choice." She had no intention of getting out. Not now, not ever. The lights grew larger, closer, and at 12:24 a.m., they were close enough to make out the shape: a white van. The same van she had passed on the shoulder, its headlights now blazing like twin suns in her mirror. Her stomach dropped, a cold, sickening feeling spreading through her entire body like ice water flooding her veins, and she pushed the gas pedal all the way to the floor, her car lurching forward with a groaning protest from the engine. The speedometer climbed to 75, then 80, but the road was too rough, too unpredictable, and she felt her tires losing traction on the gravel, the back end fishtailing slightly before she corrected it with a desperate jerk of the wheel. The van stayed with her, matching her speed with terrifying ease, and for the first time, Rachel allowed herself to consider the very real possibility that she might not make it out of this alive. She thought about her mother in Ohio, who called every Sunday afternoon without fail, her cat Mango staying with a friend while she was on contract, all the patients she'd helped over the years, and wondered if any of them would remember her name. The van's headlights flashed once, twice, 3 times, as if signaling her to pull over, and she ignored them completely, jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached from the pressure. At 12:29 a.m., the road split into a fork, 2 paths diverging into darkness, with no signs, no markers, nothing to indicate which way led to safety and which way led deeper into the dead zone. She had less than 3 seconds to decide. She chose left, yanking the wheel hard, feeling the car skid sideways before catching traction again. The van followed. Of course it followed. Rachel's breath came in short, ragged gasps now, tears burning at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, refused to give in to the panic clawing at the edges of her mind like a wild animal trying to break through. The road narrowed to a dirt track barely wide enough for one vehicle, and her headlights illuminated something ahead, a structure with a faded sign: Peterson Ranch, private property, no trespassing. An abandoned farmhouse with a partially collapsed barn beside it, and a motionless windmill standing against the night sky like a silent sentinel. Rachel made a decision that would save her life. She killed her headlights and swerved off the road, driving blind toward the barn, heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She pulled behind the collapsed section, threw it into park, and turned off the engine, plunging into complete darkness. Then she waited. The silence was absolute, so heavy she could hear blood rushing in her ears, and she pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle her breathing. Through a gap in the rotting wood, she watched the road, and after an eternity, she saw the van's headlights sweep past, moving slowly, searchingly, like the eyes of something hunting for prey that had vanished. It didn't stop. It kept going deeper into the desert, and Rachel stayed frozen, not daring to move or breathe until those lights disappeared and the night swallowed them whole. She stayed in that barn for 2 hours and 43 minutes, body so tense her muscles cramped painfully. At 3:14 a.m., she finally turned her car on, pulled out, and drove the opposite direction, headlights cutting through darkness like a lifeline. She reached a gas station in Eloy at 4:02 a.m., filled her tank with shaking hands, and told the attendant everything. He listened grimly, then told her something that made her blood run cold. 3 women had gone missing on that stretch of road in the past 18 months, and none had ever been found. Rachel filed a police report that morning. Investigators searched, but found nothing. No van, no evidence, no trace. The case remains open, a cold file waiting for answers that may never come. Rachel transferred to an East Coast hospital 3 weeks later, somewhere surrounded by cities and streetlights, and she has never driven alone at night since. She still thinks about that road, the fork where she chose left, the barn that hid her, the 3 women who weren't as lucky. And she wonders, with a chill that never fades, what would have happened if she'd pulled over when those headlights first appeared, if she'd trusted a stranger the way she'd trusted her GPS, if she'd made one more mistake on a night already full of them. Some questions are better left unanswered, because the truth would only make the nightmares worse.